Plugin of the week comes from Softube. It's the Chandler Limited Zener-Bender. This is actually a hybrid, or it's actually two things built into a channel strip sort of function, or a mastering channel strip, if you will. It is the Zener limiter and the curve bender kind of work together into one unit, giving you basically a full mastering chain. Now, if you're familiar with the original curve bender and the original Zener limiter, essentially the only differences are things that appear here in the center. Otherwise, functionally, they're all identical to the individual units, except you get a few more features built inside. Now, I believe you have mid-side processing with both, although this will set it for the whole thing. You could put the EQ before the limiter here, so that allows you to do that. You could set up an external sidechain and have a filter on that sidechain. Otherwise, you have an individual sidechain filter over here, but that only works within the normal functioning itself. But this is separate for the external, and there's an external sidechain gain control, allowing you to sort of match up the gain reduction to this, which is, the gain structure here is a little bit odd. I've always found it a bit odd, but you kind of have, once you get the hang of it and start working with it a little bit, then it starts to, you start to get some really cool vibes or really cool sounds out of it. So let's start by just doing a quick overview here of the whole thing. We'll run right straight through some audio examples, excuse me. So essentially what we have here is the curve bender here, which is a 4-band EQ. It's essentially like a modern recreation of the EMI TG12345 curve bender. The original had 9 fixed frequency points, which are all highlighted in white here. The yellow ones are added frequencies that was added by Chandler. Now, this was all done in conjunction. It was part of a 75th anniversary thing for Abbey Road Studios. So Chandler worked directly with Abbey Road Studios, having access to the original equipment, and the EMI staff, or the people that are staff engineers there at Abbey Road, and put this together. So there's a bunch of other features here. You could see that they've added the shelving EQ on the top and bottom end, right, instead of just the bell curve that was on there. We have the high pass, low pass filter, so that's all added in. Other additional features here for each of the individual bands is that you can flip them out. In other words, take them out of circuit or operate them in what you would call like mastering mode. Now, in mastering mode, essentially it works here where you get plus minus 5 dB. And if you put it at the times 1.5, it actually will make this plus minus 15 dB. At least that's what the manual says. I think that 5 times 1.5 is 7.5 or something. Maybe I got that wrong. But, you know, I could be wrong about that. It's what the manual says, so I'll kind of go along with that. And so we have that basic setup there. The high pass, low pass filter is a pretty soft curve. There's 6 dB per octave, so it's not a steep, 12 or 18 dB per octave thing. It's a first order noise filter, high pass, low pass filter rather, excuse me. And yeah, so that's the basics there. You could take it in and out of the circuit. Like I said, it operates mid-side. You can link or unlink the channels, which allows you to operate them independently of each other. So we'll kind of go through a little bit of that. On the limiter side here, what we have is an input gain which can either be high or low. So the Zener limiter is based on 2 vintage EMI limiters. One is the RS-114, which is a tube limiter, and then the RS-168, which is actually a Zener limiter. The Zener is like a diode circuit. So I'm not sure if it's like an actual VCA that's actually doing the compression. I believe that the original one that was in the console, the TG12345 console, was a VCA, a feedback style VCA compressor, but it may be the Zener diodes used for the actual side chaining, controlling the attack release characteristics. So I'm not exactly sure about that. And that, these go back, the RS-168 was from 1968. I guess that's where they got the 68 number, but the other one was from 1954. So this is kind of technology that goes right back to the 50s in terms of a hybrid of the two. Now, essentially what you have is an input impedance, and the input impedance changes the gain structure. So the high was the input impedance from the original console, Oh, I'm sorry. No, from the RS 168, and then the low gain was from the input impedance of the TG12345 console. So that's the basic structure there. So essentially, when you're pushing this up to high, you're going to get more gain running through there, like 12 dB more gain. So you'll get a whole lot more gain reduction. This is actually a limiter that you can operate with pretty heavy gain reduction, and it kind of holds together. There are some compressors that are like that. Interestingly enough, the Neve 2254 compressor is very much like that, where you could just crash right into it with 6 or 10 dB of gain reduction, and it just sounds as musical as can be. And there's some similar characteristics here, which we'll kind of hear as we go through. Now, there's also a mode here where you can operate it in THD mode. If you have the limiter in, then it will operate the compression circuit. Otherwise, if you put the THD mode in, it's basically for overdrive distortion. So the THD you see here, if you drive it, there it gives you 0.04%. You can go all the way up to 2%. What they claim is you could basically turn a sine wave into a triangle wave, and in terms of just the amount of grit or distortion. So you could operate the input and output controls to get two-stage distortion, and the compression circuit is taken out. But if you put it in limited mode, then you get that. That's in and out. You can put the EQ prior to or after the compressor, and then you can link the channels just like you can down here. So right now I'm going to leave this out of the circuit, and we'll dive right into it. One other quick thing. There are 3 compression settings. There's compression 1, and this goes back to the RS-124 that had like a slower time constant, so it's like a 2-to-1 ratio. If you go to the limit function, they don't give a ratio for it, but basically it attacks faster like a Fairchild. It's basically modeled after a Fairchild 660, which they had at Abbey Road Studios, and I think the originals for that were made back in like 1950, so that's actually would make sense, given the timeline in the studio there. And they probably modified it and did some stuff there. The EMI engineers there were amazing. And then the Comp 2 is basically a hybrid of the two. So you get the faster response settings of the limiter, so you get more aggressive release functioning, but you get a little bit of some of the characteristics of the compress 1 setting. So it's kind of a hybrid in between of the two. And then you got a sidechain filter here, which allows you to filter off in case the low end is sort of driving the gain reduction a bit too much. So we'll play with that. So let's start with the EQ. Now, the EQ is sort of set up mastering style here, so you have stepped positions. There's no way to go in between. I'm sorry, those are the frequencies here. So it goes in half dB step positions. So as you kind of work through the different settings, there's no way to get anywhere in between there. I say it's like a mastering thing. Part of it is discrete components, so they can actually really super calibrate, make everything just as precise as can be, rather than the variable, which can get a little bit off on certain things, especially when you're trying to balance like left-right gain structure and things like that. So they can make those perfect, and it also makes it reproducible if you're doing this in the hardware form. So they preserved all of that, and sounds pretty amazing, just as always. So what I have here is just a sample track here. We'll go through, and I'll just dial in a quick mastering here. I'm just going to bring in a little bit of body into it, into this master, which I feel like it needs a little bit of air up on the top, and maybe kind of a subtle dip maybe in the low mids, just to kind of tighten up, get the low end to kind of sink, see if I can build up the size of the track a little bit. So here we go.
I'm busted flat. It's only Monday. I got 4 more days till I'm paid again. When the weekend comes, I'm dreading Sunday. I grab a cooler of beer and a couple of my friends. And this red dirt road that goes on forever. Some would say the party never ends.
it takes away like a little bit of the boxiness of it. I'm just going to try one other quick thing here just to see if I could tuck a little bit of 800 in there just to kind of get back a little bit of the boxiness. But I'm just going to take it out here. So let's just see. Let's see if I play with it a little bit, see if I can find if that's the area that I'm thinking of here.
I busted flat. It's only Monday. I got 4 more days till I'm paid again. When the weekend comes, I'm dreading Sunday. I grab a cooler of beer and a couple of my friends. And this red dirt road goes on forever. Some would say the party never ends.
Now, here, one way to have this set up, there's a couple things I could do here. If I switch it to mid-side mode and I unlink the channels here, one thing you need to be aware of, if you make an adjustment here and then you link the channels back, the settings will pop and slave to the left channel. So just be aware of that if you're working, within the plugin itself. So I'm going to take this out, that little dip there, which I think was primarily like a vocal thing I was thinking about. And I'm also going to push a little bit more air over on the sides. So let's just see if I can get that to open up a little bit.
I busted flat. It's only Monday. I got 4 more days till I'm paid again. When the weekend comes, I'm dreading Sunday. I grab a cooler of beer and a couple of my friends. And this red dirt road.
All right, so one more thing that I'm going to do. I like the way that sounds there. Just pushing that extra dB up there on the top kind of really like opens it up, adds a little air and presence and size to the overall mix. I'm just going to do a little high pass and a low pass filter here, because who wants 30K in their mix anyway?
I busted flat. It's only Monday. I got 4 more days till I'm paid again. When the weekend comes, I'm dreading Sunday. I grab a cooler of beer and a couple of my friends. And this red dirt road goes on forever. Some would say the party never ends. But I feel my time is growing closer. That might be where it all began. I'm gonna live each day like it's a Saturday.
Okay, so I basically like this. I'm actually going to run it into the compressor. It's typical to kind of do your equalization post-compression, because if I change equalization settings, it may change gain reduction settings. But I feel like this on its own, if put into here, will kind of solidify or sort of glue together the movements. Even though they're not radical movements, I feel like it'll kind of tie things together a little bit. So now if I put this in, the gain is I'm going to go into a low gain mode, and let's just see. And this is where I'm going to show you a bit about how the gain structure of this can feel a little bit odd at first, and then, more or less how to compensate for it and how to make it all work. So essentially, we're driving input gain, so it's kind of like a fixed threshold kind of thing. If I remember the actual original TG12345 compressor, I think it's always basically compressing. I don't think there is a threshold per se, or like threshold is like the floor, like minus 60 or something. And it's just like always compressing. And then it's just, I think it also had on that channel, there was like some kind of a ratio control way of kind of working it, which is not the case here. But let's go with compress 1. We'll go through a couple of options here, and let's just kind of see what we can work with it. More or less what we have is a fixed threshold. We're going to drive input gain to get some gain reduction, and don't be surprised if it's some crazy numbers here. So here we go.
I busted flat.
And don't be surprised if watch me push plus 10 dB here either.
I busted flat. It's only Monday. I got 4 more days till I'm paid again. When the weekend comes, I'm dreading Sunday. I grab a cooler of beer and a couple of my friends. And this red dirt road goes on forever. Some would say the body.
Now, I haven't kind of come up with an approach here. There's a couple of ways to go about it. I think what I'm going to do here is work with a slower attack, get this to breathe a little bit. The original one had just one attack setting. So what they have here, that would be the number 2. They don't give any numbers on it, but it's pretty fast. It's probably in the millisecond range from just from the way that it sounds. So I'll be able to drive a little bit more gain into this. You could hear that, and this is not unusual if you're getting lighter gain settings. It's almost not designed for that. So I'm adding plus 10 dB here, and I'm adding more gain here, and it's still not driving through because of the amount of gain reduction. The other way to go about this, here, let me back off here a little bit. Let me go back here for a second, and try the high gain, and let's see where we're at with it.
I busted flat. It's only Monday. I got 4 more days till I'm paid again. When the weekend comes, I'm dreading Sunday. I grab a cooler of beer and a couple of my friends.
All right, so that's probably getting a little bit closer to what we want here.
I busted flat. It's only Monday. I got 4 more days till I'm paid again.
All right, and then using the sidechain filter here, I can get this to be a little bit more reactive. And let's see what happens if I kind of work with the release here a little bit.
I busted flat. It's only Monday. I got 4 more days till I'm paid again. When the weekend comes, I'm dreading Sunday. I grab a cooler of beer and a couple of my friends. And this red dirt road goes on forever. Some would say the party never ends. But I feel my time is growing closer. And that might be where it all began. I'm gonna live each day like it's a Saturday. I'm gonna move along right down the line.
So that's compressor 1 setting. Let's dial in compressor 2, which is going to be a little bit more aggressive in terms of the movement. I was trying to dial in some of the original settings, which are in white letters here in the characteristics. This is too slow and this is a little bit too fast. So having those in-between settings kind of helps to make it a little bit more musical. But here we go.
I busted flat. It's only Monday. I got 4 more days till I'm paid again. When the weekend comes, I'm dreading Sunday. I grab a cooler of beer and a couple of my.
All right, so this sounds louder. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go for the limiter so that the compress 2 has a little bit more aggressive, not a ton, but let's work with this a little bit and see if we could drive the limiter, get a little bit more gain reduction going on here with that.
I busted flat.
Maybe I could work with a faster attack here on the limiter.
I busted flat. It's only Monday.
Yeah, it's probably a little bit too aggressive. Let me just see here. Maybe if I go to a slow release.
I busted flat. It's only Monday. I got 4 more days.
Yeah, that's. I think I'm gonna have to back off there a little bit.
I busted flat. It's only Monday. I got 4 more days till I'm paid again. When the weekend comes.
Far more aggressive, a lot of pumping and breathing, probably great for like a parallel on the drum compression, but not so great for this. So let's go back to the comp 2 setting here for a second. Let's see if we could dial that in a little bit, maybe with a faster attack.
I busted flat. It's only Monday. I got 4 more days till I'm paid again. When the weekend comes, I'm dreading Sunday. I grab a cooler of beer and a couple of my friends. In this red dirt road that goes on forever. Some would say the party never ends, but I feel my time is growing closer. That might be where it all began. I'm gonna live each day like it's a Saturday. I'm gonna move along right down the line. If you ain't got friends, you ain't got nothing. You better pick a side before you're out of time. Let me tell you, son, you're wrong.
In this case, it seems to sound better with the EQ after, and it's not like I'm pushing a ton of gain there, but it certainly seems to drive more. Maybe it's just that extra low end energy that sort of drives it. But when you work with this, though, you can really, you really have to dig into it to kind of to get a feel for the gain. I know it's like very weird to look at this and think, why do I need to add 10 dB of gain at the output? To get some, compression or get control of the compression and have these outputs. But this is really the way that the hardware works. It's an amazing compressor, really great for mastering, like as a pure mastering chain. This can be, especially on the limit setting, really great for aggressive compressed drum settings and things like that. And even if you just work it on stemming down all your drums to a stereo channel, and popping this in on there, you could really, dig in and get a lot of extra stuff out of it. It's great to kind of combine the two of them together, just so you have them all and you're not fiddling around with 2 separate plugin windows and working with it that way. They all tie together very nicely. Love the mid-side processing, which is another component here that I wasn't thinking about with the gain reduction, but I think that's a lot of this because the mid-side basically works both evenly. So I guess I was getting a little bit of that in there, and I could probably unlink and tie those together. But a very cool one. Softube does it again. Really great job putting the two of these together as a channel strip. And there you have it. Plugin of the week. Softube Chandler Limited, Zener-Bender.